Welcome guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joe, and with me as always is my bodacious co-host,
Brian.
Hi Brian.
Hi.
And this week we're going to be talking about Season 3, Episode 21?
21, yeah.
Graduation
Day,
Graduation Day, Part 1.
I made this mistake a couple of times when looking it up. I kept looking up for Graduation Part 1. I think we refer to it as Graduation the whole way through the TV show, and yeah, I just noticed this.
I think we know it as Graduation. You know it's the Graduation episode.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's like The Expanse. I always refer to that as Expanse.
I mean, a lot of this, maybe it's specific because...
Maybe it's a Bernstein Bears thing.
Maybe. But this whole... most of the episode does not take place on Graduation Day.
Sure.
Most of it takes place on the days leading up to Graduation Day. This episode specifically doesn't take place in Graduation Day.
Yeah, 100% true.
So,
do you want to hit us with the Buffy on summary for this episode?
Sure. So this is Graduation Day Part 1. It was first aired on May 18th, 1999. We'll have to remember next week to talk about the airing date of the next episode. Mm-hmm. Do you know this?
I do not.
It was aired 2 months later.
Oh,
Graduation
wow.
Part 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, and it was written and directed by the one and only Joss Whedon. So, here's a Buffy on summary. From Anya, they learn that ascension means becoming a vast pure demon. The mayor plans to speak at graduation and eat the class. Faith poisons Angel with an arrow. Wesley forbids Buffy from seeking a cure and she mutinies. The cure is a Slayer's blood. Buffy fights Faith, whom she stabs with her own knife, but Faith throws herself from the building.
I feel like that misses out all the high school
it does.
stuff, the social drama, which isn't important, of course.
No, of course not.
So, in terms of...
Bronze banter?
There's a bronze banter, yeah. I was actually going to try and segue smoothly into it, but in terms of bronze banter...
No, you do your segue. We'll pretend that never happened.
So in terms of other iconic TV shows which are near and dear to my heart, as we've alluded to, we have been watching the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Picard, which is the latest Star Trek series.
Yeah. And
it's been pretty great.
It's been pretty good. It's very comfy. It doesn't seem like overly ambitious in a way.
Yeah, it's I think there's a real market these days for tight stories told in established vast universes. The Mandalorian being a perfect example of that.
We keep going with Mandalorian.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've killed so many of our darlings this week in terms of television. I think we'll have space for that.
We had an incredible evening on Friday evening. We had the last episode of The Good Place, which we both just wept yeah,
cheers.
little eyes out at. We had a new episode of Picard, and then we had the last 8 episodes of BoJack Horseman. I
feel like we should have ended on The Good Place though, because what you've actually described there is a downward trajectory in terms of seriousness, or in terms of the
BoJack Horseman is the most serious one of the 3.
That's what I mean.
Oh, sorry.
So you're starting at the really arguably optimistic or fulfilling ending, and then you have Picard, which is about confronting our idealism with kind of the painful realism of the modern day, and then BoJack Horseman, which definitely has very affirming elements to it, but is about the hard, unglamorous work of being a person. So I think if we went the other way, I wouldn't have been quite so devastated by the time we finished.
The last episode of the Good Place was just incredible. It was totally unsurprising, and yet incredibly lovely.
Probably the best philosophy themed television show.
Probably. And the finale of BoJack was really, really good. Not as good as its penultimate episode though, which was an absolute visual, audio storytelling masterpiece. Oh, so good.
There's a great tradition though, and in Buffy occasionally as well, of the penultimate episode is the crescendo, and the last episode is the coda, essentially.
Yeah. Is
there an episode of Buffy called Coda? There's definitely one Star Trek called Coda.
I don't know any Buffy episode called Coda.
Okay.
I don't think there is.
But it's specifically the one, all those are great shows, but they've all come to me in my adult years when I have emotional architecture to interpret them.
You have emotional architecture?
Compared to when I watched Star Trek back to back. And we were making a joke recently, so this is a convoluted metaphor, but I'll get there. The fact that in the Hitman video game series, the Hitman is the product of 5 greatest criminals in the world, called his 5 fathers, and he's cloned from them, and that's why he's meant to be so amazing. So we were discussing who my 5 fathers would be. One of them absolutely has to be Jean-Luc Picard.
Who are the rest of them? One of them was Kevin
Garvey from The Leftovers. Who else was it?
Michael Sheridan.
John Sheridan from Babylon 5.
Michael.
Yeah, there's a few of them. They'll come back to us. But so like Picard is like an incredibly important figure for me in terms of my my childhood, my emotional development, my interest in storytelling. I think that in the next generation, where I've made this point before, that television at the time, the standards were different, the kind of storytelling was different. It was meant to be much more piecemeal, much more episodic, and within that, Patrick Stewart portrayed a man who had strong morals and a strong sense of principle. I would highlight that while I'm having this like very like introspective monologue right now, Brian is clearly looking up who my other fathers are in our WhatsApp converstion. But anyway,
well, you see, one of them was Giles.
It was, yeah, definitely an aspect of Giles in there as well.
Yeah, and another one was so it's Kevin Garvey, John Sheridan, Giles, Jean-Luc Picard, and the last one he said was Northern Line.
Yeah, YouTube personality, Northern Line, it's true. But anyway, so Picard, great. And when Jean-Luc, pardon me, let me try that one, take a run at that again. When Patrick Stewart last played Picard in Star Trek Insurrection, which I think
2003?
is 2003, around then, he was never going to play it again. And you believe that. There was no reason for him to return to it. He is not in it for a paycheck. He is not going to just keep making cameos and things. It is not the kind of actor, the kind of person he is. So, it was... The idea of him returning to a TV show as Picard was as fictional to me, or as unlikely as, Uncle Ben is alive again, that kind of thing. It can't be changed, So it's been really interesting to watch. There's been a lot of comparisons between it and Discovery as two kind of post-Golden Era Star Trek shows and their differences. I think are very different beasts, but it's very much like an introspective
post Silver Era.
I suppose, yeah. A very assured show in terms of it. It may have missteps, but it has a specific story it's trying to tell. I've been really enjoying it, and I think there is a challenge there which they're engaging with, which is they have to adopt a certain amount of the J.J. Abrams style, the action adventure, the same way that it's difficult to go back and play video games from 20 years ago and get the same kick out of them. Like, you have to be in Technicolor, but do that in a way which is not shallow. And it's been a bit of a ride so far.
Patrick Stewart just steps right back into the characterization as well. It's just like his warm Jean-Luc Picard harshness is immediately there.
And given that he's so in the mainstream, probably his portrayal of Professor X is overtaking Jean Picard in the recent 20 years or so. The fact that he differentiates them so well is really interesting. But it has Star Trek is at the heart of the purpose of science fiction, in my opinion, about reflecting the modern day and also extrapolation where we could go. So to do that, Picard has to, in an authentic way, update its milieu from the 1980s to the current year. And there's a lot, without being obvious or too obvious. So there's a lot of thematic stuff in here about refugees, about increasing isolationist behavior in nations or super planetary organizations who supposedly have ideals of kind of freedom and integration, about transhumanism and the development of artificial intelligence and how that reflects modern technology, which couldn't have been envisioned when Next Generation was written. It's really interesting. And I've seen so many incels online just completely misunderstand it.
Oh, really?
Oh, I saw this some completely just off the walls interpretation of like the last episode where it was just, it's not real Star Trek and it's just like a socio-political propaganda, and why did they say this and then do that? Makes no sense. A Romulan would never do that. It was just kind of the kind of nitpicking that we would do about the rise of Skywalker, and acting as if that last episode was the worst thing that was ever written and was like incomprehensible structurally.
That's so weird.
It's bizarre. But yeah, that kind of reactionary stuff I think is really interesting.
We also watched AJ and the Queen last night, and that was wildly bad.
I don't know if I watched. I don't feel like I took anything in from that. So this is RuPaul's. He has blackmailed someone to make some TV show, which is basically like a feature length or TV episode length version of him in the acting challenges on RuPaul's Drag Race.
It was awful.
It was actually excruciating to watch.
We put it on thinking it was going to be like funny bad,
yeah,
but it was actually just the worst thing I've ever watched. Oh, it was awful.
Really bizarre.
We said we would do a short bronze banter, and instead you talked about idealism and Star Trek and socioeconomical.
I think we need Star Trek more than ever. More than ever. Go watch Star Trek Picard. It's not just for Star Trek fans. It's for everyone.
Cool.
Go watch it.
Okay, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Oh, actually, one quick note I have before we get into the thick of it.
This is about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
We got a new book. We got a new book this week for Buffy for doing our Buffy studies. Which is it was from Aoife, my sister. So thank you very much, Aoife. She gave it to both me and Joel. And it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Philosophy, Fear and Trembling in Sunnydale. And it's edited by James B. South. James B. South obviously doesn't value his own work because the typeface on the front of this book makes it absolutely impossible to read its fucking name. But it seems quite comprehensive, and just given how wanky we are about philosophy and stuff in this podcast, it will almost certainly come in handy. So I'm looking forward to that.
Now I know it's
a collection of essays as well, by the way.
I know that writers don't set the covers of their own books, right?
Someone has to approve this at some point.
True.
Joel, look.
Yeah, that's just a log of yellows on slightly darker yellows.
Yep. Anyway, okay. Graduation.
It's alright. It was fine.
Graduation part 1. So we actually watched
Graduation Day part 1, bro.
I just said that.
Okay. Yeah.
We watched this separately. We watched it on Amazon Prime. So we actually watched the
HD remake,
which is hilarious because this is one of the most nefarious episodes when it comes to HD remake, because it has the shot, which we'll tweet out, in which Buffy and Faith are like jumped through the window fighting, and you can see an entire camera crew filming them and like someone taking notes and stuff.
It is egregious.
It's just shocking.
But what I will say is, in watching it in the HD version, aside from the obvious issues like that, I feel this episode really crystallizes that when you see it in the way that, that kind of bad presentation, it does take away some of the verisimilitude in the sense that you can see that they're sets. Yeah, I feel like when they're in the high school, they're on the roofs particularly.
Yeah.
Look fake in a way that a good presentation can hide.
There's a very interesting conversation to be had there, just in the sense that I watched a really interesting H Bomber Guy video a while back about VHS and horror essentially, and he was talking about how the first time he watched Alien, it was on VHS, and it really contributed to the horror of the piece, where you weren't sure if the alien was in the background of any shot because there was so much fuzz and so much granularity to the granularity in a negative sense to the images at any given point.
Graininess,
yeah. And it meant that you could never tell if the alien was there, and it gave you this real fear of you can never tell. And the medium contributed to the message, whereas a Blu-ray version, you can see the alien in a couple of shots where it's previously it would have been a question mark there and stuff.
Yeah, well, I would say arguably that I think I don't really feel that films before a certain age should be converted to Blu-ray, and depending on certain genres.
Well, I mean, films are a hard one to say about, because films, when they were shown in the cinema, would have been shown on film stock, so that would have been 35mm, which means that it would have been incredibly high visual quality, as high as a Blu-ray. Sure,
but you must agree that there's a certain a certain era of film where converting into Blu-ray doesn't actually necessarily add much to the experience.
For sure. And there have been some really, really bad Blu-ray conversions from film stock over the years. TV, however, absolutely was not shot to be shown. It was never seen before, the last 10 years in anything near 1080p, It's actually crazy when you kind of really get into any kind of analysis of television, is how much it is seen as disposable. Even up until obviously 60s, 70s, they were taping over the episodes every week. Doctor Who obviously has this issue where there's just entire seasons of Doctor Who lost. Yeah, it was entirely there was nothing retained or worthy of retention as far as people were concerned to a large degree. But even up until recently, as you said, a lot of these
shows and episodes of things were not designed to have great visual quality or great continuity because they weren't meant to be revisited to a certain degree.
Like, one of the things I noticed about this episode was there's a shot with Willow in it, and it's just entirely out of focus in the HD remake, and I was just it was so clear that like this wasn't just not intended for DVD quality broadcasting. They were looking at that shot, and they were looking at it through the film camera, and they're saying, listen, it's fine if it's out of focus because this is going on TV.
Yeah,
you know, it's going to be low quality broadcast over literal airwaves kind of thing.
And it's not a question of lack of care or of poor production. It's just it's a different value system for television, where now television has become such a prestige thing. It's
going to be funny when we got in a couple of years' time, well, probably in like 20 years' time, when people look back on films made in the last probably 10 years or so, anything that was shot in digital video, they're going to be looking at it and they're going to be saying it's mad that they went for 1080p video photography or videography for this period, because it is a step back from 35mm photography. Yeah. Because you can get like a Blu-ray quality image from a 35mm stock, but you absolutely, like, I mean, 1080p is 1080p forever. You know, and so much of what we experience in the world is 1080p specifically.
Sure.
And you can't do
this. It's locked.
Like all the Avengers movies and stuff like that, they're all shot in 1080p.
Yeah.
So you're never getting any more detail about that.
It's mad.
Yeah. Anyway, so in this episode, the gang. Actually, no. You give us our like actual summary.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fairly accurate in terms of the kind of hardcore plot elements. But basically, we've a classic kind of ramping up to the conclusion of the season. A couple of things crystallize, which is that we learn in this episode that the mayor is going to be giving the commencement speech on graduation day, which, given that they knew that it was going to happen on graduation day, it shouldn't have come as such a surprise to them that there was some relation with it. And also, much more crucially, the mayor arguably makes a misstep in terms of killing someone who draws attention to the fact that once he does become a demon, he's no longer invulnerable and can be killed. And we get a lot of crystallization really for the first time in the show. We have Anya giving very salient information about what a pureblood demon is, and that the gang have never met an actual demon before. They've only met hybrids.
Anya has actually been to an ascension before.
Yeah. Really, I think that whole thing's a really interesting element for me. I'll talk about that in a bit. And then on the other side of it, which I think is just as significant, is we have kind of a closing of the arc of the high school is hell thing. We have, compared even to the start of the season with Aang, we have Joyce thinking that Buffy's running away again. In fact, Buffy's staying but sending Joyce away to keep her safe. She's required to trust Buffy, which she does. People are signing yearbooks, and they're equally kind of dealing with the existential dread of leaving high school. And Xander saying, I always knew I wouldn't survive this place. And obviously the kind of the key conceit of the show being that's both literal and figurative.
Apparently that was supposed to be when Anya dies in season 7. Apparently was supposed to be Xander originally who died, but Emma Caulfield specifically was like, I need to die in this episode. I cannot do this anymore at any point.
But that's interesting, and we can talk about that a little bit as well. But the Anya very strongly makes the point that don't stay and do this, you will die. And obviously that's what happens to her eventually as she kind of reaches the end of her humanity arc, as it were. But yeah, and we have kind of this is a great headline episode for Buffy, because we have a lot of the great narrative construction of it in terms of we have the mayor, when they're in the middle of making their plan for how to deal with him, he just casually walks into the library and confronts them, and Buffy's always been great at doing things which kind of make the viewer uncomfortable, because you think when you see them planning, it's like, okay, I can kind of sit back and feel safe for a few things because no one's going to die that I like, and he just walks in, and that's kind of very discomforting, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And they not reintroduce, but I think he's been sidelined for a bit, but Snyder to obviously set him up for the next episode.
He kind of disappeared after Bang Candy a little bit.
Yeah, he definitely did. And it's kind of really pulling a bow together on this idea of the town itself being corrupt and on this. So obviously it doesn't end, and I definitely don't consider the later seasons to be disconnected, but this is definitely this is an actual one of Buffy for me, closing these 3 seasons.
In terms of structure as well, it's really interesting in the sense that it does that really nice thing where this episode is about fighting, the hand-in-hand fighting, you know? So there's lots of Buffy, and there's a huge scene of Buffy and Faith fighting in which the stunt actors are so fucking clearly, you know, there. Whereas, like, in the next episode, it's going to be about fighting the literal huge demon and the kind of the larger machinations of that. I like that kind of, like, that ramping up where you deal with your not your minions, but your thematically important lesser villains in your ramp up to the conclusion.
Yeah, because I think in this kind of narrative, I think it's very tricky to do emotionally significant moments in the middle of fighting the big demon. And I think they should always be, I think you should lay 99% of your groundwork for that in, as you said, in penultimate episodes, and then maybe have a hat tip to it in the actual scene. But like it happens so quickly in this, in the Avengers and Game of Thrones, anything big like that, like you should be doing that earlier. I
mean, like, and look at Becoming Part 1 and 2. Becoming Part 1 was all about setting it up and setting up the emotional aspects of it and everything, and Buffy getting ready to be able to kill Angel. And then in Part 2, the whole thing revolved around that one moment of Buffy realizing that Angel has come back and killing him anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. But I enjoyed this. I thought this was exciting. I felt everyone was on top form, and for me, even kind of with, you know, being so familiar with it, the kind of the tension and the excitement of finding out what the mayor is becoming and kind of almost stealing that information from him, and then they have that great scene where they find a illustration of the demon he's going to become, Olvacan, in an old, you know, ancient manuscript, which as they kind of open the pages out to look at the demon, it unfolds out like a pin-up girl, basically, like in 3 different directions. It's a weird joke, but like it's effective.
Yeah, Xander also says in that scene, he's like, Charles, what would you have done if someone had actually come in to take out any of these books? And he's like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and no, I do think that thing that kind of Anya says about kind of crystallizing, you know, that, you know, in the primordial age, you know, true demons walk the earth, and it was hell, and you know that they've never actually met a demon because they're enormous and powerful and all this kind of stuff. It's scary stuff. Yeah.
That scene in the library, I think, is very important in lots of ways. For one thing, Giles stabs the mayor. He drives through him with a sparring sword.
Fencing
rapier. Fencing rapier. Which is really affecting. It's very much the Giles that is seeded through the show of, you know, willing to do something incredibly dangerous to hopefully.
Yeah. Obviously, the provocation of, you know, the really kind of twisted power dynamic of the mayor, arguably having quite a strong fatherly bond with Faith in this episode, and I think go back and forth about how sincere that is, but you know, it's kind of displayed, and he criticizes Giles, saying that, you know, he's raised Buffy to be disrespectful and disobedient, and that he's going to eat her because of it, and that's the moment that prompts Giles to stab him.
The line is, that's one spunky little girl we've raised, I'm going to eat her. So there's lots of like misogyny in that quote, and the way that the mayor interacts with Faith, I think, is quite misogynistic as well. Yeah. In the sense that he's incredibly demeaning over, not demeaning, he's incredibly belittling over. Like he
infantilizing.
He literally dresses her up in this episode. He puts her in a pink dress that she clearly is uncomfortable in. She buys her things to keep her happy, and he has her unquestionably go out and being his killing machine. So it's all not very good. I have a nice little quote about that, actually. Rhonda Wilcox says in Who Died and Made Her Boss, which is in Fighting the Forces, the mayor feeds Faith, dresses her, and buys her toys, a PlayStation, and an especially vicious knife. He clearly feels affection for his killer. After she kills the scientist, he says, no father could be prouder. The series presents their comfort and of each other's loneliness with sympathetic understanding, but their relationship is pathological. In contrast, Buffy, not long after, refuses to take orders any more from the patriarchal Watchers Council, referring to her decision as graduation. So there's a real parallel between Faith's relationship with the mayor and with Buffy's relationship with Giles, absolutely, just in the sense that Giles actually respects Buffy. Just last episode, or in this episode, when Buffy tells Wesley that she will no longer be working for the Watchers Council, Giles doesn't feel the need to explain further or to back her up in any ways. But when Wesley pleads to Giles to talk her out of it, instead Giles just says, I believe Buffy said what she needs to say.
Yeah.
It's in no way it's 100% deferring to the person who knows better in the situation, which is what Giles always does, you know. It's a great moment, and it's absolutely
Earned.
it's very much earned, and it's absolutely what happens here is that Buffy is, or Faith is the Buffy that is wild, reckless, dangerous, and like accepting of the patriarchy to some degree. It's crazy.
Yeah, at kind of a theoretical level, we can say how much is Faith at fault or responsible for this, while still saying on a practical level she's obviously fully responsible for her actions. You know, but
that's why she atones for them over the space of the rest of this show and Angel.
Absolutely. And I was very aware. I was looking up a picture of Faith's tattoo recently for something, and
you're gonna get a tattoo?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. How differently she dresses in the later seasons when she's kind of found more of a center, it's just interesting. But yeah, I think in many ways, like, the show is really starting to aggressively interrogate the fact that the Watchers Council and the Mayor of Sunnydale are kind of two sides of a similar coin in some ways. They both, have a condescending attitude towards their slayers.
Absolutely.
And the fact that Buffy is kind of resisting that on both sides, it's kind of really core to what the kind of the message of the show is, I think. So I want to ask you a question. So this scientist that Faith kills, and notably, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the only other example we see of her kind of really willfully killing a human.
I think it's the only example, full stop, right?
Well, yeah, because as she's done other killings and kind of stuff for the mayor, but this is just...
There were demons and stuff. I think
this is just... Exactly. This is just a guy that she kind of really cruelly and slowly murders.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a nadir for her in terms of her development. But one of the weird notes was when she comes into this professor's apartment, he makes a remark about how he, there's no one else there that she needs to worry about because he's a lifelong bachelor.
Yeah, I know that too.
No one has ever said that and not being meant gay. No one has ever said that and not meant gay.
You're right, yeah.
Which I just thought was a strange note. I kind of like compare that on the other side with I think you and I both know this in our separate viewings, that there was the Xander's teacher who had the joke about doing a game of hangman for the last.
They always guess E.
Yeah, was really attractive.
He was pretty attractive.
Like surprisingly attractive for like teachers are usually cast as meant to look as like kind of frumpy essentially. Do you?
I was saying to you, he's actually been in 4 episodes. So he was in. So yeah, that's Mr. Miller. He was previously in Innocence, I Only Have Eyes for You, and Anne. So there you go.
So what did you think of, I suppose, the kind of thematic link in this episode between Anne and kind of the two sides of Buffy's development in this season?
I think in this season, Buffy has to really reckon with her quest for meaning and for growth. So she's kind of in this season, she's kind of had to stare down the fact that these structures. So I mean, what's his name? Joss Whedon has said that the theme of the season is abuse of power specifically. So if you look at the season, and as she Buffy realizing for the first time that the structures around her school, the mayor representing broader patriarchal structures and governmental structures, and Gingerbread being very prescient of all this, of course, where basically Joyce and everyone see a kind of like abuse occurring and reacting in all the wrong ways.
Yeah.
This is Buffy maturing into a moment of seeing this kind of like existential absurdism and reacting, in a very mature way. So it's posted in Anne where she runs away, which I think is totally appropriate.
Yeah.
And a necessary moment. But what she learns there in Anne is to band together. That was the theme of Anne, is like that kind of communist, socialist banding together of people and worker solidarity.
Sure.
And that's what the pinnacle of the season is going to be. In the next episode, we'll talk about that more next episode. But she riles the troops up. She gets everyone together, and the reason that their plan is successful, the reason they're able to overthrow the mayor, is because of Buffy's ability to inspire and to give people a reason to believe in something. So this growth from being someone who doesn't believe in herself to knowing the cause that she's fighting for, knowing it above structure and above the reason men have told her to fight for, it's really cool.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and like it's a real...
Thank you, I wouldn't have known otherwise.
It's a real reflection of how... Sorry, 1 second.
You're fine. Don't burn yourself, okay?
Huh?
Don't burn yourself. Sorry, you may be able to hear in the background, Joel's just taking a fish pie out of the oven. It is literally crackling. Wait 1 second. Shh. Hopefully that comes up in the audio, but it's literally crackling.
It's still cooking quite loudly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's something that the show really examines here is that the mayor and the Watchers Council, understandably, accurately in many cases, rely on the fact that the people they are oppressing or controlling with the power will not interconnect, will not network, will not work together. And obviously, like in the same way that the mayor has generally been able to have power in the town because people will ignore the strange events that go on, is similar to the way that the Watchers Council have kept the Slayers and potentials separated and not allowed any kind of sense of kind of cross community lineage there. So yeah, what Buffy does is the ability to actually make people do the thing they absolutely don't want to do, which is acknowledge the terrifying circumstances they live in and band together. So
yeah, it's great.
I think Joyce's line when she finds Buffy packing her bags is like, "You're running away again and you're taking my clothes." It's quite good.
I prefer your line in that scene where she said, looking back at everything that's happened, I should have sent you to a different school.
That's very good.
So while Faith has her lowest moment in this episode, Buffy, given that Faith is her shadow self, similarly has a very low moment in this episode where she guts Faith.
Yeah.
So Buffy goes to get Faith because Faith has shot Angel, has poisoned him with some special poison.
Killer of the Dead, which can only be cured by... I like how they close any loophole here, because they're very specifically like you have to drain a Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is funny because in the next episode, the way he's cured is that he feeds on Buffy and he doesn't drain her.
I think we'll get to it, obviously, but I think he brings her to the point where she's like once again nearly dead, essentially. So it's incredibly risky.
So he's dying, which is not great. So yeah, Buffy goes like, she very, very like determinatively says, I'm going to go find Faith and I'm going to bring her to Angel to feed on, which is morally very questionable thing to do. Mm-hmm. It's even more morally questionable when after a big fight, which was actually very well choreographed, it was really fun, it was really excessive and dynamic, and it was all through Faith's apartment and then eventually falling through that window and
onto the crew,
onto the crew. Buffy, ends up like stabbing Faith with Faith's gross knife.
Do you think if Faith hadn't jumped off the roof, she would have gone through with it?
Well, the thing is, Joel, like, that's a fatal wound.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about the fact that Buffy just tried to kill someone, a human.
Absolutely. I think she definitely does. I think she seems shocked when she does it.
She's horrified by herself when she does it. And that's fair in some ways,
But like in some ways, is there anything more inimical to what the Vampire Slayer is meant to do? Like she basically is going to kill another Slayer to save a vampire. Yeah. Obviously, there's extenuating circumstances, but it's very, it's very kind of inverted.
It is, yeah. One of the things during the fight with Faith is just like there's so much those two characters. You could write so much fan fiction about them, and you can write so much. So many like essays just about the characterization of the two of them and just how wonderful they are. And Eliza Dushku and Sarah Michelle Gellar play off each other so fucking well. Eliza Dushku outshines Sarah Michelle Gellar in a lot of the scenes, which is hard to do because Sarah Michelle Gellar is stunning in this show. But
they're an exceptional pairing.
They really are. And when Eliza Dushku, when Faith is saying, give us a kiss to Buffy in that moment, it was just like, it was perfect. It was so tense and genuinely sexual, I would suggest. And very disturbed and aggressive, because in some ways I could 100% read Faith as being heterosexual in that moment, even, and that kind of aggressive sexuality as being a learned behavior of a very damaged person,
dominance and navigating power dynamics by using sex. And equally, she could potentially not be straight.
Of course. I mean, like, I 100%, if Joss Whedon came out tomorrow and was like, oh yes, Faith, bisexual, I'd be like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I suppose it's just one of the interesting things to bear in mind whenever you're doing these kind of sexuality and gender close readings of things is that there is no... Like, it's important to understand that there is no clear way to tell from, and I mean in fiction, this isn't a PSA about gay people in the world, but people really like to hang their hat on this moment does or doesn't mean that, when people are much more layered and complex than that in reality, and characters are as well. So I think this is a note in her characterization, rather than any of these things being evidence, or you can't have the hard and fast answers you want sometimes when it comes to fiction. But I think the fact that that's what kicks off them fighting is really interesting, and it's really mirroring the slightly poisoned passion of her interactions with Angel in the previous season, which at turns were melancholic, sexual, threatening, intimidating, violent. All of that was in the mix. It's something which she has to deal with again and again, is that the Slayer is about the brightest things in life and protecting them, but also requires so much death and so much pain, and it's a constant kind of riding of that line, and it's kind of different variations of that, what she encounters, I think, in the different seasons as she goes along.
Absolutely. I think that's probably a lot of what we were intending to talk about, right?
It's a very good episode.
It's really good, isn't it? I think I probably prefer the prom to this, but I definitely prefer Graduation Part 2 to any of them. How
do you feel about two-parters generally?
So Buffy tends to do two-parters very well. I think a lot of fiction tends to use two-parters to just stretch out one bad storyline.
To avoid editing.
Pretty much. Buffy tends to do them very, very well. Because Buffy is just so continuous. When they're not doing Monster of the Week episodes, it feels very much like every episode is flowing into each other very nicely. I'm Buffy two-part episodes. I'm cool with. Other TV shows I often find kind of annoying.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of any specifically bad two-parters. Doctor Who has had some very drawn-out two-parters.
Yeah, it's not usually necessary in many ways in Doctor Who.
Like the Daleks in Manhattan.
We don't speak of that poor what was that Spider-Man who was
Andrew Garfield. Actually, one of our notes for the week, if we're talking about TV, has to be spoiler alert for Doctor Who. If you haven't watched new
if you're a Doctor Who fan and you haven't watched The Fugitive of the Jadoon, which is the episode we're to refer to, skip forward a couple of minutes maybe.
But yeah, so there's a new Doctor. She's a black woman, and Jack Harkness came back, so that was cool. Yeah,
so significant in many ways. One which is that last time when Jack Harkness, the character played by John Barrowman, was last on Doctor Who, originally in Doctor Who in 2005, 2006, 2007, that kind of era. Was quite a significant figure in terms of being a bisexual man on.
Pansexual, probably.
So the character of Jack is technically omnisexual because he sleeps with any gender or race.
Sure.
When I say race, obviously I mean alien species, etc. But I would always argue that in practice it's a bisexual character, or bi or pan, in the sense that it's a character that was identified with by many bisexual people at the time, and in my opinion, I would argue that there wasn't a prevalence of discussing the sexual orientation of pansexuality in the community at the time. So it tended to be, if you went to a conference or a group event, you would have primarily bi groups or bi discussion panels, not necessarily pan discussion panels, which is you have now. So just in terms,
I think people usually group bi and pansexual people together in groups these days in those things.
They can or they can't. They do and they don't. But just I'm saying, in context at the time, the short angle would be this is something for bi people to identify with, even though the granularity of it might have been different. And also, it's just unusual to have a man portrayed as not straight or gay in a TV show.
Bisexuality is usually for sexy women in TV shows.
And in a family-friendly show and all that kind of stuff. So he's very interesting that way. The fact that he's returned is significant in many ways, unexpected, but by far the kind of much more shocking thing was that a great deal of furore was made around the fact that the current Doctor in Doctor Who was cast as a woman, which is something which has been proposed since 1972, constantly rejected, with such fucking sewer drudging headlines as, oh, were they going to call her Nurse Who, etc., so on and so forth. And in this episode they essentially have what seems to be an incidental character completely unexpectedly from a viewer point of view, from a production point of view, be revealed as another female incarnation of the Doctor from an unspecified time in her history,
or future.
Yeah, well, like her future history.
True.
So yeah, it's like in terms of the show, groundbreaking. Like
exciting.
The fact that it's not part of, it wasn't part of a series finale. It hasn't easily been explained, and it's just in terms of, if we want to talk about feminism, we want to talk about kind of like baking these into better writing. You no longer have the current Dr. Jodie Whittaker having to have the mantle as potentially being the one only Doctor who's ever a woman. They've already smashed that, so, and just introduces such interesting conversations, because it's actually not dissimilar to the Faith Buffy dynamic, because when you have two women doing different presentations of it, you can kind of compare and contrast how they present themselves, what aspects that they bring forward, what aspects of their gender they engage with or don't engage with, etc. Yeah, so like really, really kind of an exciting time for what is quite a has historically been quite like sexist and misogynist property in many ways.
For sure, it was a very Russell T Davies episode, all told. I think it was very like of his style, which is nice. I really like Russell T Davies era Doctor Who is far and away my favorite.
I always like when something like this happens, because I can feel less regret about my Doctor Who tattoo.
Okay, let's do some Buffy bits. Joe, Buffy at one point in this episode says she is swearing off office romances. She exclusively has office romances going forward. The vending machine that Willow says opines over, where she says, "Oh, vending machine, we will miss you. You only ever gave out the wrong things. You'd ask for Dr. Pepper and you'd give us a Coke. People have suggested it's broken because of the many times it was abused in this show. For instance, Buffy smashing Larry up against it, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was the cop. And alternatively, when it crushed that guy.
I was going to say like zombie that in the Zeppo, crushed his head.
This is the only time that Anya and Wesley ever interact.
Fair.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Faith has a line that she says to Buffy, which is, "Look at you, all dressed up in Big Sister's clothes." This is the title. Big Sister's Clothes is an Elvis Costello song, which I quite like Elvis Costello. If you haven't listened to Elvis Costello, go off and listen to him. He is the progenitor of pop punk, realistically.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that to you. I know you.
No. You are waving a pen at me while you're saying this.
It's true. But people have also read into this as being a precursor of Dawn coming. And I think, I'm not sure if it's in this episode, but is it Little Miss Muppet and 730? Is that what they say in the next episode? Anyway, there's loads of presaging stuff in the dream sequence in Graduation Day Part 2. It's one of my favorite dream sequences of all of Buffy, so I cannot fucking wait to talk about it. But yeah, I think there's a hint of Dawn in there, so that could be a Dawn reference there. Oh yeah, and one of the last things I'm going to say is that Anya talks about having a car outside, but then also in season 5 can't drive. What the fuck? Worst TV show ever.
Ruined.
Yeah. Oh, no. One of my notes here is very upsetting. It's just Faith has no fear because she has no self-worth. Oh yeah, she's talking to the mayor. There's a really nice little sad conversation she has with the mayor where she talks about back in Boston where she would jump off the highest part of a dam or something,
like a cliff into a river or whatever.
Yeah. And none of the other kids would do it, and she didn't feel any fear. And it's, she has no fear because she doesn't see herself as being worth anything. It's very upsetting. That's all my Buffy bits, I think, for this week. If you want to go ahead there, Joe. Yeah.
So we see Harmony again in this episode.
Vacuous tramp.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and Willow calling her vacuous tramp. Like once again, Willow, like, what's Willow's damage in terms of specifically other women? I like a lot of the time.
She's queer, Joel.
True, very true.
She's in the closet.
She obviously Harmony being set up for the next episode. There in terms of her death and undeath. Mm-hmm. We have. I think it's quite playful the fact that Giles and Wesley are literally fencing because they've been verbally fencing for the whole season. Yeah, which is quite nice. Giles has started wearing jumpers.
No, we're not doing fashion yet. I want to say that because I have notes about Giles' jumper as well.
We'll come back to Giles' jumpers. I like the thing where Angel's kind of trying not sneak up, but trying to like soulfully come into the apartment while Buffy's investigating, and he slips on the floors that have been cleaned.
Yeah, it's very prescient of what happens in Angel.
Yeah, it's very much kind of introducing him as, you know, just like a guy as opposed to like a romantic force of nature. And we've completely skipped over the fact in this episode that Willow has sex with Oz.
Oh yeah, that's it's a really lovely moment.
Yeah, it's probably the first healthy sex that has happened in the show.
That's not fair. Innocence and surprise, that was healthy sex.
Like, okay, maybe in terms of its motivations, but not in terms of its outcomes, Brian.
Fair, okay.
Not a fucking vampire, Brian. And you know, but like literally, like any other example I can think of is you know, it's either a mantis lady trying to eat Xander, or Faith trying to choke Xander, or Giles and Joyce under the effect of magic candy, etc. So like, yeah, it's like a weird like climax of that arc.
Oh god.
What else do I have?
I'm so glad Xander finally stands up for men's rights against Anya. That was great.
Yeah.
Someone needs to say it.
Xander did have a funny joke in this episode, to be fair. At one point while they were trying to figure out the poison, he was like, "Hurry up, man, come on, the suspense is killing Angel." And that just made me laugh. And we also see the mayor eating those Gavrockian spiders, which is real gross. But he talks about how his organs are shifting and merging to make way for the ascension. And this is a really like evocative image that stuck with me over the years.
That's 100% just what happens in Annihilation.
Yes, yeah, it's all drawn from the same well.
Annihilation was so good. It was so good. I'm gonna rewatch that tonight. I love it so much. Anyway, okay. Fashion notes. Giles is wearing a jumper. And it's really nice. It's a really nice jumper.
Tell me more about this jumper.
It's like a loose neck. It's a jumper and it's knitted. I like it.
Loose neck was my prison nickname.
That's disgusting, Joe. Don't talk to me. Xander is also wearing a jumper in this episode at the very beginning, and because of the HD version that we were watching, you could see exactly how it was stitched and everything, and it looked like a cardigan that had just been stitched up the center. Okay. It was really upsetting. I didn't like it. Faith wears her very childish pink dress in this episode. It's very
sundress kind of.
Yeah, it's specifically a sundress, and it's very like it's very childish and upsetting. Percy is in this episode. He's talking to Willow and saying how nice it is that he can forget all his stupid history stuff
yeah.
once he's graduated.
One of the longest running relationships in this show in some ways.
Yeah, sure. But he's literally dressed like Fred from Scooby-Doo in that scene. Mm-hmm. It was weird. Buffy is wearing a very nice sheer top with like, you can see her like tank top underneath it. She just looks great. It's like a sheer slightly sheer hoodie kind of thing, and it's actually she looks really good. So yeah, that's all my notes about fashion. Do you have any more fashion notes, Joe?
No, I just think Cordelia looks great throughout the episode. She wears a couple of outfits, and they're all just very, very chic and very just, you know, effortlessly kind of well put together. So I think she actually gets more and more fashionable as she goes on into Angel. So I'm just excited for the Cordelia chase that's coming up. Okay,
death count. It's just your man.
Yeah, so just actually, I have his name. Do you have his name?
Professor. No, I don't.
Yeah, so the only death we have in this episode is Professor Lester Worth, the volcanologist and lifelong bachelor who saved the entire town and the Scoobies with his investigation of a different version of the Overcan demon who was killed under a volcano. Mm-hmm. Like literally, like the unsung hero who has saved this entire universe.
It's true. Okay. What's your rating, Joe?
I would say 9.8 Lohessian four-wing soul killers.
Okay, great. Tell me more.
Just a great episode. One of the best episodes of Buffy, without a doubt. It's a great run. It has a great characterization from everyone. It has funny moments. It has genuinely poignant moments. It has peril. It feels like an escalation of everything that's happened in the last 3 seasons in a way that doesn't feel forced or artificial or inflated. I think it really actually does a great job of balancing the central pitch of the show, which is, you know, hell, but also high school. Sure. And both those things to the 16, 17, 18-year-old mind can have equal peril.
Sure.
and fear associated with it. And I just think it's as sharp today as it was when I first saw it.
Absolutely. I'm going to give it 9.4 vacuous tramps out of 10. It was really good. Structurally nice. A nice build-up. I prefer the prom and graduation day part 2, which is the only reason I'm rating it down.
Yeah. You never like the first, like you never rate the first half of a 2-parter.
Yeah, you're
as
right.
well.
You're right. I'm also like I'm having a bit of an existential crisis.
Okay.
Because I feel like season 3 has gone down in my estimation. We'll discuss this obviously further in length because we're gonna have a big long episode next week and we'll do a review of the whole season.
Yeah.
I think season 3 has gone down in my estimation. Not because I think it's bad. I think it's incredible. But I've always kind of considered it to be my favorite season. I think it's been knocked off the top spot.
And replaced by 2.
I think so. We'll have to talk about that next week.
Okay, get into it. Okay. Thanks so much for listening. And I hope you're all judged up for next week's season 3 review, and obviously graduation day part 2. And really the end of the first kind of grand arc of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, you can really break it down into 3 distinct sections. It's seasons 1 to 3, the high school years. Seasons 4 and 5 are the pre-death years, and seasons 6 and 7 are the post-death years.
Yeah,
I think.
So exciting.
Yep.
So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week for graduation day part 2. If you like what you hear, tweet at us, let us know. It's always nice to get some compliments. If you have bad opinions, don't tell them to us. And otherwise, tell your friends, tell your hot teachers to listen to Buffy Boys. And we'll see you next time on this podcast, which is called
Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
See us.
See us.